Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We just wrapped up the regular split of the LEC. I was still in a hotel. This was my final day on the LEC. I'll be back for the finals. During the time in between, of course, I'll be co streaming as per usual. I'll be co streaming the LPL playoffs, the LCK playoffs, the LCS playoffs, and we will be co viewing the LEC with the gang as per usual. I am planning a trip of some sort that will not kind of destroy my schedule. I think it will amplify it in a way, and I'm hopeful about what I can piece together. Quite tired, but at the end of a good work day, I think it's good to be tired. We had a very interesting set of matches. I hope I didn't spoil you by having all of the drafts in frame. Um, I'm just going to remove them like that. I think at this point, if you click this video, probably you're expecting to be spoiled, or you have already watched the matches and you would like me to talk a little bit over them. The first game of today, we had BDS versus XL. So in this one, we had the Draven, Maokai, Zaya ban, Annie, Caitlyn, Lulu ban for red side with Varus first pick. Usually, sometimes we see Zeri first picks here, sometimes we see Varus first picks. I think this is perfectly fine. I think in the context of course, Crowny, I think Varus is a champion that he can deliver on. Varus is first picked, followed by Rakan Sejuani. Good combo because Rakan actually counts as a melee champion. Of course, Varus can match with a lot of supports that can be strong into Rakan. Rakan is not the strongest laner in the context of what we see in the LEC. It's more of a scaling champion that provides you with tools. The follow-up from BDS here is to Azir 2-3, which I can respect because in the end, on blue side, most of the time you do have to blind pick mid because in a lot of cases we see the fourth pick either Azir or we see a fourth pick top. In this context, right, many teams like Azir, and this is probably the last week of play that we will see Azir because the rework on the new patch is quite weak. I think this is perfectly fine to move in this direction because it gives you a lot more build flexibility on Varus too, because Azir can build in a way where he actually does damage to tanks. Excel follow up with Ashe and Darius ban, which is sure fine, like Ashe and Varus is a combo that we saw even on the day. And BDS ban Nar and Jax. Excel decided to piece together here an Olaf situation because they wanted to deny the enemy from picking Olaf. Of course, you're already showing Sejuani and Jax is banned. So on paper, you think to yourself, oh yeah, Olaf doesn't have that many counters open. And probably, you can get through with it. But Adam slammed the set. So in my experience, I have no experience. In regards to Olaf set matchup, I don't know really how it goes. It seemed like we have to trust, we have to trust Adam's judgment on this. Set is something he plays a lot, and this game was heavily influenced by the fact that Adam was dominating. They managed to find an early gank, they managed to kill the Olaf, and he doesn't have ways to TP back, and he's playing Flash and Ghost against the Ignite set, and Adam was snowballing the shit out of this game. They went for Renata. I think Renata is good when the enemy team is already showing a relatively short range composition and you have ways of masking Renata's weakness with the Azir. I think Renata is good here into Rakan. Very polarizing when Renata is good and when Renata is bad. I think it's very important to be on the side that outranges the opposition and invites the enemy to go into you. They pick Gragas on 5, which I think is perfectly fine. I think into Azir, the whole point of Gragas is that he can sustain, he can set up ganks, and also he's one of the few champions that has dashes, so he can't necessarily get shuffled so easily, right? So draft-wise, I think that this is fairly fine. I think Olaf has a lot of CC to avoid. It all comes down, Olaf matchups are very volatile, right? So you can fall behind and lose the game completely for your team, or you can be decent and you can be very strong and snowball, right? Very polarizing champion, Olaf. So it's like more niche when you want to pick it because you want to invite it into certain compositions. More on that when we look at, of course, the G2 game. I think this game was just a highlight reel of, first and foremost, we had the first initial gank. We had the first initial gank where Oroamne dies, he has no flash, no ghost, there was already a lot of action on the top side. There was some good play as well from Nuke that I wanted to highlight in this particular fight. I thought this was pretty clean and crispy. He finds a situation where he just shuffles the enemy, avoids the Rakan, and then he flashes to join his team. I think this was decent. All in all, this game I think was only contentious because Patrick and Limit managed to find some kills, 2v2 in the bottom side. But in the end, I think BDS is a superior understanding of team fighting and their ways of now starting Nash in a more convincing fashion when they're stronger. I think this is a strength that BDS has built up over the split. Finally, there was a big fight on around the blue buff that I wanted to highlight, which I kind of liked. Adam has been very good at baiting fights in a way where he survives. Many times he uses plenty and kind of got away with it. But all in all, I think BDS just showcased that they are the better team and they are much more cohesive when they are team fighting together. Final thing I wanted to highlight is just the itemization here of Crowny. He went for this AP hybrid build, which is super good into these health stackers. I was trying to think of ways of how to incorporate AP into a Varos build because the weakness always was you can't really buy AP early game because it's going to just make your early game too weak. And I kind of like the Shield Bow Ginzu into the AP transition. You have many options. The defensive options in the AP build trees, in Zonya's Hourglass, or you can buy Nash's Tooth or Death Cap in this case. I like it a lot, and it is a very clever way of making sure that you're useful. The enemy team is already itemizing armor, right? Because you have Wukong and Set on your team that are snowballing. So you are going to get value here. I like this a lot. Crowny has been an absolute smurf when it comes to the itemization. My man's ascended to a different plane. We continue to the second game of the day, which is Astralis versus Fnatic. This was a very interesting one. Astralis targeted all of the jungle champs. They first pick Zaya away, and Fnatic follow up with Jinx and Sejuani. Naturally, this is a situation where you have to choose to trade. I think in the case where you ban Zaya, you give Sejuani to Astralis, could be very tricky. So I understand that this trade played out the way they did. They needed to entice Astralis into picking something else because in the case where Fnatic ban Zaya on 3 and Zaya's completely been dominating, then Astralis get the first pick Seju. Maybe you can reconsider the Annie here and maybe just ban Sejuani, Elise, and Zaya if that's what you're afraid of. But in the end, I think, preparing against Astralis in best of ones is definitely something that is tricky. Astralis follow up by picking Maokai and Jax, and I think that's like an interesting approach, right, against Oscarinin, who has had success on Jax and has had success on Olaf. So far, I think that's been the best performances of Oscarinin, and it's something that Finn likes to play. I think Fnatic pulling off the Jace here. I think it's interesting, right? Because the enemy team is already revealing the fact that they have Jax. So it's not the same circumstance that we saw the other day when Astralis could red side Irelia and then choose to follow it, wherever the Jace goes. I'm just going to show you guys this one real quick, right? So this is a situation where Maokai, Hammerdinger, and Jace gets picked, and then Irelia on 3, and then they're going to 5-pick a top to be fine into both matchups. And it's very hard to find a champion that can go into 2 lanes and also be good into Irelia at the same time. So Irelia's going to follow Jace wherever she goes. In this circumstance, in this draft that plays out, you might ask yourself, oh, is this not a leader Irelia angle? Well, of course, in this particular spot, he would have to blind it because Jax going mid is something that is unheard of. And if, Jace goes top or something like this, things can get awkward very quickly. Coming into 4-5, Fnatic chose to ban Braum and Leona, which really signaled that they wanted to 5-pick a mid or top. And Braum Leona bans are, of course, to set up the Nautilus. After the Nautilus is out, they pick the Thresh. In this spot, just because of the fact that you picked Jinx, I think that you are a lot more limited in your options of what you can and cannot pick. I understand the Thresh, but Thresh adds that added layer of kind of volatility in the game, right? Advian, before this match, was winning a game on Rakan, was winning games on Nautilus, and this is what stood out to me as the things that he's comfortable on. And they picked Thresh. Trish Jinx, classic lane, you can do many things, but it did invite the very dangerous Young Hoon Blitzcrank. I think Blitzcrank is very good here into the Thresh and Jinx. They're going to be under pressure. And of course, Thresh and Jinx need to find ways to chip away at Zaya and Blitzcrank's HP bars and find good bases to find some kind of advantages. But it's on a knife's edge. If Blitzcrank has any freedom at all, any room at all, this lane will become very volatile very quickly. Surprised here by the Z blind pick. I have to admit, I am not so well versed in this situation, but it is interesting to see, you know, leader being put in that position where he has to blind pick. I think so far I only remember him blind picking a Rise otherwise. And I think that's something that is worth to explore against Astralis. The Z blind pick, on 5, there's a lot of options for what you can pick here on 5. I think Fnatic, like I thought that maybe they're gonna pick Silas, Silas with Maokai ult, Blitzcrank ult, fine into Z. Um, Maybe not the greatest into Zaya and not the greatest into Jax, so maybe that's a consideration. They could have sent Jace into mid against Z, and they could have picked, for example, Malphite on 5. That could be an angle, and that could have maybe made the draft stronger because the enemy is very AD heavy. A key thing to note, though, I think Zed is one of the few champions in Jax as well. These are two champions that don't mind too much if the enemy is stacking heavy armor, which might sound strange, but with a lot of AD items being heavily centered around the balance of Black Cleaver and Cyrilda existing in the game, Zed definitely has ways of finding, being useful in the context of being against armor-heavy teams. But Fnatic pick LeBlanc, which I think is perfectly fine. I think this is a very hard matchup for Zed in the early game, and LeBlanc is playing against Zaya as well. So, looking at Fnatic's composition, they have ways to contest in the early game, they have ways to poke, and what the Astralis want to look for is all-out brawls where Zaya actually gets value, but Fnatic really need to leverage their range. Another thing to point out here, right, is Fnatic has a lot of champions that I like to call shutdown champions. You die once with these champs or die twice, you're going to have a very hard time. I'm looking specifically at Thresh, LeBlanc, and Jace. These are champions that require clinical precision to execute well in the game, and this game became dirty very fast. If we think back to some of the Fnatic wins, they were very one-sided, the previous ones, the previous 3. I think still they gave some opportunities to the teams that they faced up against to come back. If you remember the G2 game, right, Razork had to steal a Nashor even though they were dominating. If you remember the game against Mad Lions, there was moments that looked dangerous because Jinx was getting one shot right. And they had a lot of freedom to make a couple of mistakes, at least. In this one, you cannot make any mistakes at all, right? It's a very different kind of nuance. But this is the thing that you trade off, right? On 4, I'm not so sure which other super that I would want to pick that would be like good to blind here, right? Like all of those options, like you might think to yourself, oh, why didn't they pick Braum or something like this? Like the previous game, the enemy picks range champions, you're going to be in danger. Or, the other thing is maybe they shouldn't have not have banned Leona and just banned Braum as an example, or leave Braum open and just play Nautilus Leona no matter what and let the enemy play Braum because Braum Zaya isn't the best combo. Maybe that's something that they should have considered just to make sure that they actually get a melee support on 4 that works well with the rest of the composition. But all in all, looking at the game, Astralis definitely made some blunders on the top side. They, in this game, Fnatic was super, super far ahead and in very good conditions. But I wanted to highlight what was the big turning point for when Fnatic began to lose a lot of steam. We look at this situation here. There was a moment here where Razok was posturing forward, didn't spot the pink, and Astralis did a very good job of hovering around these areas and looking for these picks. They weren't contesting on the waves, they were contesting in areas where they could cut off a Fnatic's play. So we have this situation. Razork managed to get himself killed, followed up by a shutdown. And then we had this situation too that is very strange. It's just so important for Fnatic's composition to actually give LeBlanc and Jace the freedom to rotate their abilities. Every EQ they fire at the enemy is going to do serious damage. Every LeBlanc combo with Ludens is going to be serious damage. Obviously, poke is something that has gotten nerfed with the addition of BT, well, not the addition of BT, but with the buff of BT. But in such a window in the game, whenever you have windows to group up together, I think it's very important that you let your champions do work. If you look at this situation here, this fight is so awkward because Reckless doesn't really have like a clear decision of where he should go because he cannot fight through mid, obviously, because Zion Blitzcrank would cut him off, and then he's trying to find angles from the other side. I understand why you would want to go for something like this, but aesthetically, this looks very unpleasing. We let the play through, you're in danger, the Blitzcrank can just find the hook right. Here, this is practically a 3v3 fight, and Jinx is just a bystander. Kobe didn't have E up just yet. He's waiting for it to pop down, and these are some, you know, uh, decent shutdowns to go the way of Astralis. And these compositions are so polarizing that if blue side is ahead and they can be first on location, whoever red side is going to throw to the wolves, the person who's going to get hooked is going to die. And these mistakes that just occurred are, of course, mistakes that just cannot happen. Here, once again, they were very good at posturing in river and they waited for this opportunity. Jace was catching bottom side. Humanoid was looking for poke in a moment where he could not and ended up dying. The rest of the game, I think, plain and simple, was just the composition of Fnatic running kind of out of steam. You can't give shutdowns away. You can't give your advantage away because if you find yourself without sums or you're no longer ahead of the curve with likes of Jace and LeBlanc and also Tresh, you're going to fall flat and you'll not be able to enter the space of Astralis. Very, very good comeback win here from Astralis, a very good look. But once again, Fnatic highlighting, that this identity they need to play through, is just, I think they just had too many champions that operate on a knife's edge. When I was watching this live, I thought that they had a very good composition going on, and I think they did a good job of making sure that they last pick mid against leader and so forth. But Astralis just proved to be a much better team on the day, and I think there is some optimization to be done when you look at the 4-5 of Fnatic that we already talked about. Moving on to the next game, I don't think we need to show much of. Actually, this one we can show. Team Red versus SK. I think SK this winter, this summer, spring, the spring split, they've completely lost themselves. And I think that we can start that conversation from draft. SK did the rookie mistake of giving away Zaya, that then opens up the enemy to take Vi. Here in this position, right, Team Heretics banned Elise, Sejuani, and Annie, and there is no real trade-off here for Team Heretics. Team Heretics found a very nice win with Vi and Ari previously, and this is a position where they lock in Zaya, SK go Varus and Maokai. And Maokai is an additional layer of this that makes things so much more complicated, which I will get to later. Here, just because you have Maokai, enemy team goes Vi and Ari, and of course here in a lot of cases you want to look for some counters to Ari, right? Oh wow, we can play Lissandra here, and it's going to be fantastic. But the fact that you have a Maokai locked in makes you very limited. Here I thought, if you're looking to go for this angle and you want to go for the early game angle, I think that you should look to pick Varus and Viego together. This is something that Astralis did, this is something that of course G2 did, and I think that it allows you to really, really tunnel in on this idea of pressuring the game early and invading the enemy camps and then finding a counter on support. But they go Varus Maokai, which locks them into an idea already. Especially if you're not willing to pick Jace on 3 and flex it both ways. I think this composition gets a lot worse. But it's another layer to it is that Vi and Ari are pretty good into those poke compositions anyway. So here, this Ari is masked by the fact that the enemy has a Maokai, because the enemy, if they want to play Maokai, Lissandra together, you're outscaled on Cleanse, you're outscaled on Mercs, you can't hard commit so hard into this idea. It's like Frozen 3 combo, that's not something that I ever want to say on broadcast because it sucks. Unless, of course, you want to pivot and put Maokai top lane just to, find some God mode, Sicko mode draft or Maokai support. 1 second, my door is knocking. Well, someone's knocking. Yeah, I'm not editing that out because this is not being edited. This is just, I'm one take Drake. Where were we? Maokai, Lissandra together, unless you Maokai flex into support and you play Maokai top maybe and you find like Lissandra, Viego, right? So that's why like Varus, Viego together gives you so much more flexibility. You know the Vi is coming and then the enemy can't pick Ari. Because imagine you have Varus, Viego and then you go Lissandra on 3, checkmate, you won the game. And I think this is, SK, a big strength of theirs was the read on the meta in winter, and this split very rough. So they bang YamatoCannon, some counter picks into Jax, okay, fine. Team Heretics remove Ashe and Renata, which is also fine, right? They are trying to remove the anti-engaged champ. Maybe Ashe is a little bit stranger to ban, but they're just afraid of how strong that potential matchup can be in bot. But DOS doesn't strike me as an Ashe enjoyer. Nautilus Kesante, and then the 5-pick Braum, which is perfectly fine, right? 5-pick on Braum, we take it. Enough about draft though, just this highlight here. I just want to pull this up and show you guys, look at the itemization in this game, right? So you have a Crown Azir, right? Which is okay, the enemy has Vi, Nautilus, they have ways of engaging. Crown can get value here, as long as you itemize fully damage after the Crown. I think it's important when you buy Crown to hard commit into DPS items after that point. Because you have to compensate for the lack of a DPS proc. So if people buy Crown into Zonias, usually I shed a tier for all my homies. But if you go like Crown into Shadow Flame Deathcap or like Crown into blah, 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 then it's sometimes fine. But I don't want to focus too much on this. It's more about the fact that you have Gale Force into Varus, no Mythic. You have Black Cleaver into no item Maokai. We have the situation here where Team Heretics, they just finished the Drake, and SK just want more. They just want more. They are very greedy here. Let's see just how this plays out. Mercer's almost dying. He kites back, and they keep funneling in. It's like already here, you see you have Tinkerbell, Bob the Builder, and Robert and his cousin, they're all walking in a straight line into the meat grinder, the Rizaya. So this is aesthetically very unappealing to me when I see this on my screen. Ari has ult and they're all walking in a straight line chasing the kill that is Mersa. If this, I understand why they want to go for this. They see that Zaya has no ult and so forth. They want to push, they want to get a lead here, they want to punish the fact that the enemy did the Drake. But it just ends in such a horrific fashion here. Let's just let the clip play. So look at Zaya here. She's getting value. Vi pushes everybody away. DOS, the boss, is, really, really committing to the loss. I'm not a rapper. And here's Kesante as well. Kona here to fight as well. Divine Sunderer finished on Jax, but he TPs on his mid tower to just look at his teammates die. The continuation of this game is just Team Heretics play it simple and cool. They play around the Drake fights, and they have a composition that is very easy to execute. They just have to press their buttons on the same person, mark the Jax on the flank, and all is good. Here, Evi did an Evi classic, just walking into the opposition. It's like, here's a lesson for all of you players out there. It's like, you're not tanking anything and you're not doing anything if your teammates are not in danger or your teammates are not actively hitting the enemy. So here, you have 3 players hitting Drake. If the enemy crosses the pixel point, then you can begin to push forward. It's only worth to take damage if your teammates can actively do damage. Here is very, very poor tank play because he's walking on pixel and he's zoning for what? The enemy is not even entering the sphere of influence of your teammates. When they do, you can start tanking, so to speak. So wait for the enemy to enter the sphere of influence of your teammates, then you can begin to take space and then you can begin to hit. But here, Evi is just looking for mushrooms in the pixel bush, right? But all in all, straightforward. The rest of the game, Team Rex is just set up for the Drakes. They managed to find Soul. They managed to find picks on side. Ruby, beautiful Ari game. I think Ari is his go-to. He had a completely night and day performance on Ari in comparison to everything else. I'm surprised that SK let them have another go at this. Very disappointing. I think they just realized too late that Maokai in the draft just kind of fucks them. We continue. Some juicers. Mad versus G2. Ay, 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 ay. Draven Maokai Gragas ban. Okay. Gragas Quadra Flex. Remove that shit. Okay, I respect it. Maokai, okay. The enemy plays a good Jace. Okay, we remove it. Draven. Annie, Rakan, Zaya, good bans. Remove all of the good engaged champions in the meta against Hilly. Enemy first picks Vi. The response from G2 right away, we go Viego Ashe. Viego Ashe. Wonderful. In a lot of cases, we see Viego Varus, Viego Ashe also fine. It gives you some flexibility on the AD carry position, especially in Hansama's case because he enjoys the Ashe AD carry too. We continue. Mad Lions slam the Ari and Varus to take a page out of the Team Heretics book. Of course, this situation is very different because the enemy can, in fact, pick Lissandra on 3. So it could have been very dangerous. Lissandra on 3 could be very rough, but it seems like G2 was afraid of the potential bans. Even though I think in this case they could play Ashe Heimerdinger if the enemy bans Sivir. They can play Ashe with counterpick support. If Heimerdinger and Sivir gets banned, I think there was some room to be flexible here. But I think G2 don't want to be put in a position where they have to consider to play AD Zeri. And Sama doesn't seem too happy playing Zeri. I think it's a champion that he is less successful on. Nevertheless, they pick Sivir. They follow up with Pyke and Relban, the big playmakers that, of course, Hilly has shown that he can do a lot on. We remember the Rel games from playoffs in winter. We remember the Pyke game from yesterday was a juicer. Here I knew that in the back pocket of Caps, he has a Silas. Henny he also has Lissandra and, of course, Cassiopeia into Ari specifically. I think Cassio probably could have been harder, but they just choose to only remove the Lissandra because in the end, like Vi is pretty decent into Cassio and Silas, but horrible into Lissandra. An additional layer here that is very problematic is the fact that Olaf was open. If you go back to the broadcast, I did this pick and ban on the analyst desk, and I was like, yo, Olaf is crazy here, okay? Olaf is monster. You're already showing Varus, you're showing Vi, and most likely Hilly wants to play a champion that is also going to be bad into Olaf because most supports are. This is the turbo Olaf game. You have a Sivir on your team to get the move speed. You're going to just kill a target, give Vigo a reset. This is going to be a turbo Olaf on 5 game. I think picking Jace blind probably made them a little bit more durable against it, right? Because Jace is not horrible into Olaf, but it's no Adam on set, right? And this game was blown wide open. In this particular game, this is just a G2 classic. Silas might have a hard lane phase against the likes of Ari, but there was a 2v2 on mid that Silas got a kill on, and Silas is like Caps is always going to get his homies to back him up. And the enemy team has Ashe Sivir into Heimerdinger Varus. They're going to have Prio. They're going to be able to leverage that, and they're going to be able to contest. Then the Ashe is going to connect into mid, fire arrows at your mid laner on cooldown. And they have the stronger jungler in Viego against Vi. So Silas is going to have an easy breezy time getting through lane and actually be strong in the game. And that's where Caps delivers the most. In this particular game, Viego burnt the flash of Jace, and Olaf kept his flash. So this is like a death that is inevitable. Very on a knife's edge, this matchup with Jace. You burn your flash, you hate your life. We saw that in playoffs too, in the finals between Mad and G2. Jace burnt flash against Kled and died. And then Kled has flash and ult, and Jace, his name is already in the death notes. All of these matchups, you make one mistake, you're gonna pay for it dearly, and that's the nature of it. Heimerdinger was very absurd to see Heimerdinger on 5 here. You're picking Heimerdinger into Ashe Sivir, which is very rough. I didn't like it at all. Hilly ended up just running around the whole map trying to be useful, but he just wasn't, So G2 Masterclass, very good game. Let's move on to Koi versus Vitality. Don't have any highlights to show from that one. Koi versus Vitality, Maul fight Gragas Varus ban. Interesting. Strange, but okay. I think Photon on Malphite was kind of garbaggio, but it is what it is. Zaya gets first picked, naturally. Here, it sets you up to pick a Vi. I don't know why. Koi, don't pick Vi. That was a weird sentence. Zaya first pick, followed by Zeri Jace. Photon Jace, we enjoy that, but you are setting yourself up to be in like against the full engaged composition. What does Koi do? They fucking pick Xin Zhao. I thought this was the easiest Vi lock-in of your life. Just pick Vi and the top laner that you would want to play into Jace, and then you're happy. What's going on here? What is going on here? I don't understand why you would pick Xin Zhao. The enemy's team is showing Zeri, play a little Vi, or maybe go Sejuani, that could be fine, but why Xin Zhao? Why Xin Zhao? I really don't understand. They pick Nautilus blind, so the enemy goes for Braum. Of course, Braum into Nautilus is a classic lane. Disengage when you have the Jason Zeri, you're very happy. The enemy team showed Xin Zhao already, so they just follow up with some Larsen classics. Just remove some Larsen classics, Azir and TF. And Koi decided to ban LB and Elise. Of course, they don't know what enemy jungle will be, so maybe they think they're going to run into Lee Sin on 4 and then LB on 5. That could be very dangerous. Okay, I don't mind a little LeBlanc ban against your boy Perks. Elise ban is kind of whatever. I think if Zinza can't compete against the Elise in the early game, why the fuck did you pick Zinza in the first place? I think playing Zinza into Sejuani, I think you're outscared level 1. I'm not even kidding. You're outscared level 1. You can never fight Sejuani. You can never win against Sejuani. When are you stronger than Sejuani? She's going to get level 3, you're going to get level 3, and then you're going to hate your life and hope that you can take the spear and shove it up in your ear. It's just a disaster. Following now with the Azir TF bans, they follow up with another Larsen Classic, which is Oriana. I think you can't really pick anything here to save the draft. It's like you're just doomed. But it invites the Aurelion Sol. In this game, no highlight. It's just Zinzao gets solo kill level 3 in Tribush top side, and the game is over. And that's it. Sejuani, Sejuani together with Jace, he just wanted to cover for him, and then Zinzao just died, and no joke, the game was over. Koi look terrible. The fact that they limped into the best of threes, the main thing what can help them is just figure out the meta. Like I still think they have some decent players. I think the fact that there's a 2-week break now of LEC and there's a new patch, it is an opportunity for everyone to reinvent themselves. And I think that's better for the teams that are bad than the teams that are good in terms of meta read, because it goes such a long way to have a good meta read. Koi walked into this game not being able to win. Like, this was horrible. Crazy bad. Fuck me, dude. Finally, we had a tiebreaker, obviously, because Mad Lions lost. Team Heretics won against SK. Wow. Tiebreaker, Team Heretics versus Mad Lions. Absurdities from Team Heretics. So they get the first pick, Zaya. This is what Mad Lions set up for, to get the Rakan for the Hilisang. Obviously, I think Team Heretics are happy with this because it also means that they get the clean Nautilus. If Red Side is then blind picking support, you can pick Nautilus into it. I think you're very happy. They picked Maokai here, which it's the same thing, right? At least the difference here is that Vi is out, so you're not running into like a Vi Ari, right? They pick Nautilus, they pick Wukong and drop mid, no problem at all. I think 1, 2, 3, I think both make sense for both teams. I don't really have big complaints here. Maybe you can pick Rakan Zeri 1, 2 together and then see what the enemy wants to do with jungle. But I think if you pick Maoka and the enemy picks Wukong, I think you're rather happy there. And the Wukong has been the go-to for Yankos whenever Vi has not been in the picture. I think 1, 2, 3, I think is perfectly fine for both. They follow up with Ari ban. Fuck it. He's been good on Ari. Remove Ari. I understand that. And then the moment we see the Gwen ban here, we know that Mad Lions is going to look for the Kisante on 4. There's no other reason you ban Gwen is to blind pick the mid on 4, which was surprising because I think the moment you have Maokai locked in, I thought it's going to look for Azir. I think this was a dangerous game here that they are playing because Mad Lions got really blessed by the fact that Team Heretics decided to pick Talia Renekton for 5 instead of just Sion Azir. I don't know what of course Niski would have in store on 5 here that would complete the composition. I just don't see. It's like you have Kesante, Maokai, Zeri, Rakan. I think Azir is so decent into all of them, right? But Talia isn't at the end of days, right? If you can play a good Talia, it's fine. Still, I'm looking at nameplates here, right? And I just want to have Azir and Sion, but instead they went Talia Renekton. Every game I've seen Evi on Renekton, like he's in decent conditions, but it's just not enough. And this game, you know, in the tiebreaker game, you put yourself at ease by knowing that you're stronger in the late game, but here Team Heretics are not. Azir is picked on 5, and this game was just so one-sided. So one-sided. So one-sided. Mad Lions was super far ahead. You know, they found early game advantages. A very interesting sequence here that happened in the game was Elioya went for double crab. So basically, with jungle, you full clear into bot, right? And then what happens is, if your bot is getting sister-fisted, then you lose the crab. But you base, and then you go towards the next crab. And then if the enemy jungle is greedy enough to double crab you, you get to push him out, and then you get to actually fight for his respawns. So this was a very close situation. Like, you just let this play through. Look at Elioyo. You know, he just double crabbed, right? Yankos has a base advantage. Look at those double long swords. He has a base advantage. He's chasing away on Elioya, and he survives with 1 HP. He wards because Elioya is going to, of course, go around the corner here. And when he goes around the corner, he doesn't have vision for E, but when he goes around the corner, he does E range, blah, blah, blah. Elioyo survives with 1 HP here. It's absolutely brutal here for, of course, Yankos. Some follow-up dives on bottom side that go in the favor of Mad Lions, in my opinion, here as an ending. Mercer, of course, dies too, and considering they locked in the Drake, I think that Mad Lions was very, very happy. And then eventually, whenever Zeri's ahead of the curve against champions that are relatively short range besides Talia, you're very happy. And after this, the game was kind of in the dirt here for Team Heretics. Another thing to highlight here, I think it's an absolute tragedy here that Talia goes Road of Ages. Why the fuck are you going Road of Ages here? If it wasn't for the conditions of the game, Mad Lions being so far ahead, like buying Road of Ages here can be completely game losing. And I don't want to be item Andy 2000 because we have a lot of those. But Road of Ages makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense. You are solo AP and you're buying Road of Ages. The enemy is going to have so much HP, and you need to have cooldown. You need to have ability haste. You just need ability haste, you need Leandries, and you need Archangel Staff. And then you need Void Staff, Death Cap, and you're going to enjoy yourself. But here, Road of Ages, what on earth? You don't get ability haste, you don't do additional damage, and you can't leverage the HP at all because the enemy doesn't want to fucking dive. It's horrendous. It's horrendous. Really, really it is. On most mages, you lose way too much by not going DPS mythics. The meta has shifted in a way where a lot of mid lane champs that are being played are good with Road of Ages, like the Annies and the Gragases and sometimes the Silases, and that's perfectly fine. But when you're playing the mages, the rules remain the same. You need to scale, and when you buy Road of Ages like this, you know, the only justifiable cases where you buy Road of Ages on mages, which is extremely rare, is when you know that if you survive till 1 item or 2 items, that the game is completely over. Because Catalyst is such a strong lane item, and Road of Ages is so cheap to buy and gives you stats that make you bulky. But the issue with Road of Ages is that you fall off a fucking cliff. Yeah? You fall off a cliff. I don't care if you get a level up later. It doesn't matter. You lose too much damage. He went Road of Ages into Sorcerer Shoes, 0 ability haste, 100% speed run, Super Mario, like disaster. Let me fast forward to the point in the game where this kind of became crazy. So in this moment, right, if you look at Mad Lions' composition, all they need to do is just play on Azir and Zeri. Play on Azir and Zeri, take it easy, play on Azir and Zeri, no problem at all. You don't need to engage at all. Just take your time. The enemy needs to engage into you, and always the team that is going to engage into you, as long as you're ready for it, the team that engages into you is always going to be at a disadvantage, right? Because they need to throw spells at you to close the distance. They need to break out, and then you can kite backwards. Any champion in the game is benefited from kiting backwards. And in the case where you have Nasher, the enemy has every incentive to fight on you, because in the end, when you have Prio and the siege minions are hitting the enemy turret, it means that the enemy is losing out if the status quo remains the same. So every incentive is on the enemy to engage into you, and you can't let that happen, right? The thing is, you invite bad engages and then you fight, but you don't give the enemy opportunities to fight onto you for free. So let's see how this plays out. K'Sante is on mid. And then, Mad Lions are positioning. Here, Healy gets queued and he gets comboed. This is something that can't happen, of course. He needs to wait for the next wave. This is a dry hook, as I'll Dominate would call it. They continue, and here, this is the moment where they need to take a little bit easy because, of course, they lost Rakan, and they are giving the enemy an opportunity. Here, they could have taken it slow. In the end, Mad Lions managed to take a very early Nasher. And I think when it comes to the inhibitor turret is, in a lot of cases, more important than the inhib. You already got your job done. Piecing out and playing for the Drake would have been a very free and elegant way of finishing this game, but it just gave the enemy opposition odds. So as you see, the little fight here. Here comes Evi, the Crocodingus. Mersa doing his best to get a fight going. Kasi, no ult here because he used it before. Stopwatches, but of course this is a disaster. Jack Spectra did everything he could together with Jankos to try to make this game stay alive, and it became very interesting very quickly. And the next fight that occurred was in top side. Here, I don't understand why Chasey feels the need to hit the turret. Once again, just play on your ranged champions. Why on earth do you want to go here? Why on earth do you want to go here? Just let your homies hit and trust that Karzi is going to E whatever Nautilus Q is going to come your way. Here, I was screaming at my screen. I couldn't believe that Evi was considering leaving this fight. I was very upset with him here. He just kind of goes back and jiggles back and forth. He didn't need to. He lost like a solid second there, pushing forward. Jankos found a beautiful engage. Same thing happened later. Like we have a big fat Wukong play on the mid lane. Very hard for Team Heretics to. I thought in this moment it was strange Mad Lions gave up the soul because the enemy needs to defend bot, but whatever. We move on. They trade the Nash for the Drake, and I think that's very good for Team Heretics. They get to stall the game more, and they get to invite this fight against the Nash. We have this continuation here, and look at Jankos' engage here. Man, I feel so bad for Jankos. My man is doing his absolute best to win the game, and look at Jankos finding the 4-man wombo combo. Imagine if Ruby was a little bit more ready for this, paid attention to the Wukong, and maybe followed this up with a fat W, then maybe we would have had a fat W as well. And once again, it's the same thing over and over again. I think just it's important if Mad Lions choose to siege on mid that they need to secure themselves and find a kind of space to play in. But here, Mad Lions are all hugging in the same pocket, so the engage of the enemy becomes so valuable, which in this case, of course, is Jankos. They're playing in the same pocket because they don't have information on the bottom side of the map, which makes it very awkward for the Mad Lions. And I think always when it comes to sieging mid, there's too many angles you need to defend. Jack Spectra here with the dash forward, very, very nice. He pushes forward, flashes in. Very happy to see the side of Jack because he showed a lot of this in the RLs, so that is a very good sign. And then we continue. Mad Lions did some clever maneuvering to bait the enemy into being overly interested in, of course, this dragon. They get the soul, and Jankos does his absolute best to try to get into this fight. But what I'm about to show you in terms of what Ruby did is mind-boggling. So Jankos tried to go for the steal, but he manages to kill the Alcid. Super, super strong Divine Thunder value here is gorgeous. Zaya is trying to connect with his teammates. Team Heretics are kiting downwards. Here, Evi's getting completely fucked by the, of course, Hextech Soul, and it's very rough to get away. But look at Ruby. What did Ruby do? That sounds like something Scooby-Doo would say. But what did Ruby do? And I couldn't believe my eyes. It's like here, okay, you got a couple of kills. You killed Elioya, and then maybe you can secure your base. You can push out the waves. Maybe you can, find some space to maybe contest the Nash. Still, of course, very hard game state, but Ruby completely ran it down here, and then Kazi delivered. All in all, Mad Lions, I think they are definitely the better team in comparison to Team Heretics. I think to close this chapter now on our two teams that are no longer in competition, they get a solid 2 months vacation. Damn, 2 months vacation for Team Heretics and Excel. I think Team Heretics is definitely more savable, I'd say. I think that when it comes to Excel, it's like I am not excited about anything that's going on there. I think Uramna had some decent games, but the replacement that is Limit was not the greatest. I have a hard time getting excited for anything for Excel. Team Heretics on the other side, I think Jack and Yankos, super good. I think Mars had some decent moments, Ruby on the Ari, but still, there is a big gap in the solo lane department that definitely leaves Team Heretics suffering. And the issue is, will they be able to utilize these 2 months to grow? I wonder how these teams are going to approach practice when it comes to MSI, or if any of the MSI teams wants to scrim them at all. That's also a struggle, right? If you're the ninth place European team, why would T1 book scrims with you? Like why would JDG book scrims with you? Like why would even G2 book scrims with you? Because they have an opportunity to scrim against the foreign teams, right? And that's going to be tricky to maneuver for them. But Team Heretics, maybe they can salvage by mining maybe their teams from the academy. Excel don't have an academy, so I'm more hopeful for Team Heretics growth because Yankos and Jack are very two good building blocks, and I think there's ways to bolster this team. Maybe Team Heretics look to buy out Wunder. That could be very interesting. But all in all, it is what it is. In regards to the rest, I know maybe you guys are going to be curious about the group draw. It's like I can show the group draw, but honestly, I don't think it's time for me to talk about it. This is just a recap. We will have plenty of time and plenty of days to talk about everything that will happen. Let's focus only on today, on what has happened. So hopefully, I can find a good guest for the Voice of Yamato to talk about the LEC group stage and all of the teams that are still left and the matchups that are coming up, and maybe regular split MVPs. With that being said, this is me signing off. I'm probably not going to be streaming tomorrow. I don't even know if you're watching all the way to the end, but if you do sneeze, if you sneeze during this video, bless you and bless your face. Leave a comment below. Tell me your favorite color if you made it this far. I appreciate super much your support. It is truly, I wake up every day feeling like really blessed that I'm allowed to do what I'm doing, because and that makes it so much easier to push through even when I'm tired. This weekend has been very busy, but I love being busy, because not being busy now, that would completely drive me insane. Before I go insane here on the recording, I will just shut off. Thank you very much for watching. Catch you on the flippity flop. Peace.